A woman walked into a food stamps office with a Harvard degree folded inside her bag and a 5-year-old daughter holding her hand. The caseworker didn't flinch at her address, didn't react to her income line, didn't even pause at the 3-year employment gap. But when she turned to page 3 of the file, her hands stopped moving. Her face went white. Because what was written on that page didn't just explain how Simone Washington ended up in a plastic chair, filling out forms for grocery assistance. It exposed a truth that connected both women in a way neither of them could have predicted. 34-year-old Simone Washington had once been the kind of woman people wrote about in alumni magazines. Harvard Law School, top 10% of her class. The kind of student who made professors pause mid-lecture and think she's going to change something. And for a while she did. By 28, Simone was an associate at one of Boston's most respected family law firms. Her office sat on the 22nd floor of a glass tower downtown, corner unit. Floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the harbor light every afternoon like the city was performing just for her. Her salary was $190,000 a year. Her apartment in Back Bay had hardwood floors that echoed when she walked across them in heels. Jimmy Choo heels. $1,200 suits hanging in a closet, organized by color. A brass nameplate on her office door that read, Simone Washington, J.D. And every time she passed it, she touched the edge with her fingertip like a prayer answered. She smelled like espresso and ambition. The machine in the firm's kitchen hummed all day, and Simone always had a cup within arm's reach. Her leather bag held a MacBook case, files thick enough to stop a door, and a pen her grandmother had given her when she got accepted to Harvard. Silver, engraved. Her grandmother's handwriting etched into metal. Her grandmother, Gwendolyn Washington, had raised Simone after her mother passed. Gwendolyn cleaned office buildings at night and tutored Simone at the kitchen table during the day. She had hands rough from bleach and a voice soft as church music. And she had one belief she repeated, like a hymn. One sentence she pressed into Simone's bones from the time the girl could understand words. Education is the one thing nobody can take from you, baby. Not a man, not a system, not poverty itself. Simone carried that sentence like armor, through college applications written on a second-hand laptop, through law school exams that lasted 6 hours, through job interviews where she was the only black woman in the room and still walked out with the offer. Gwendolyn Yours' voice had been her compass, her shield, her proof that if you worked hard enough, long enough, smart enough, the world would eventually open its doors. And for a while, it did. Simone specialized in family law, specifically in cases involving financial abuse within marriages. She helped women untangle the damage done by husbands who used money as a weapon. She understood the patterns, the isolation, the slow erosion of independence disguised as love and partnership. She could spot the red flags from across a conference table. She just couldn't spot them across her own dinner table. Byron Tate entered her life like a summer storm, warm at first, electric, the kind of man who made a room rearrange itself when he walked in. He was 41, CFO of a commercial real estate firm with properties across 3 states, tall, polished, smile like a man who'd never been told no. They met at a fundraiser for a legal aid nonprofit. Ironic looking back, Byron had donated $25,000 that evening, wrote the check without blinking. Simone watched him do it and thought, this is a man who understands generosity. She was wrong. But she wouldn't know that for years. They dated for 2 years. Byron was attentive in ways that felt like worship. 3-carat diamond ring. Honeymoon in Santorini. A toast at the wedding where he said in front of 200 people, everything I have is yours now. And everyone smiled. Everyone believed it. Simone believed it most of all. The first sign came disguised as kindness. 3 months into the marriage, Byron suggested he handle the finances. Both accounts, all the bills, the investments. You focus on your career, baby. You're brilliant. Let me carry the boring stuff so you can keep changing the world. It sounded like love. It felt like partnership. Simone, The woman who had helped dozens of clients recognized this exact pattern, handed over the reins without a second thought. Because, when you're inside the house, you can't see the shape of the roof. Her grandmother's voice whispered in the back of her mind, "Education protects you, baby." And Simone believed it. Because she had the degree, she had the career, she had the knowledge. What she didn't have was the suspicion that the man sleeping beside her was quietly dismantling her financial existence, one spreadsheet at a time. When Kaya was born, Simone took 6 months of maternity leave. 6 months of sleepless nights and first smiles, and the overwhelming, drowning, beautiful weight of new motherhood. 6 months where she didn't check a single bank statement, didn't open a single financial app, didn't notice that her name had been quietly removed from their joint accounts. Byron didn't hit her. He didn't scream. He didn't throw things or make threats. He simply moved decimal points in spreadsheets and shifted names on documents. He opened 3 credit cards under Simone's social security number and ran up $47,000 in debt she knew nothing about. He sold stock options that were in her name, transferred the deed of their investment property to a trust she wasn't listed on. By the time Kaya said her first word, Simone's credit score had dropped 340 points, and she had no idea. Gwendolyn's voice echoed again. Education protects you, but education hadn't protected Simone from the quietest kind of violence. The kind that leaves no bruises, the kind that doesn't make a sound, the kind that happens in spreadsheets and legal documents while you're rocking your daughter to sleep and believing you're safe. The discovery came on a Tuesday. Ordinary, unremarkable. Simone tried to open a savings account for Kaya. A small one, something to start building a future for her daughter, the way Gwendolyn had tried to build one for her. The bank declined. Credit score too low. Simone laughed at first, thought it was a mistake, asked them to run it again. Declined. She drove home with Kaya in the car seat, her hands steady on the wheel, but her mind already unraveling. She put Kaya down for a nap, opened the laptop, logged into every account she could find. Empty. The checking account had $83. The savings account she'd built over 6 years of working at the firm was gone. The credit cards, the debt, the missing stock options, the transferred property, all of it laid out on a glowing screen like a crime scene she'd been living inside without knowing. Her hands shook so hard she could barely scroll. She confronted Byron that evening. He was sitting at the kitchen island, drinking scotch, reading something on his phone, calm, composed, like a man who had already rehearsed this conversation in his head 100 times and knew exactly how it would go. "Everything I did was to protect this family. You should be grateful, not paranoid." Simone stared at him, the man she had married, the man she had trusted with her finances, her future, her daughter's future, and she saw it clearly for the first time, not a partner, a pattern. The same pattern she had identified in case after case at the firm: financial isolation, gaslighting, controlled dependency. She had written briefs about men exactly like Byron Tate. She had stood in courtrooms and argued against men exactly like him. And she had married one. She left that night. February cold, the kind of cold that makes your lungs burn when you breathe too fast. She packed one suitcase while Byron slept, put Kaya in her winter coat, tucked her Harvard degree into her bag, not because it would help, but because it was the last thing she owned that still felt like hers. The door clicked shut behind her. A small sound. Final. The sound of a life ending, and another one beginning, fragile and terrified and uncertain. Kaya slept on Simone's shoulder on the night bus, her small body warm against her mother's chest, her breath slow and trusting. Streetlights flickered through the window glass like Morse code spelling out a message Simone couldn't read yet. She tried to hire a lawyer, called 4 firms in the first week. Every single one declined. Conflict of interest, they said. Byron's company had business relationships with half the major firms in Boston. The system Simone had spent her career serving turned its back on her like she'd never existed. The woman who had helped other women escape financial abuse could not find a single lawyer willing to help her escape her own. 4 months passed. 4 months that felt like 4 years lived underwater. Simone applied for jobs constantly. sent out resumes every morning after dropping Kaya at whatever temporary school arrangement she could find that week. But there was a 3-year gap on her resume now. The maternity leave, the isolation, the years Byron had slowly pulled her away from her professional life while telling her he was supporting it. Hiring managers looked at Harvard Law on her resume, then looked at the gap, then looked at her credit report, which landlords and some employers pulled as standard practice. And every door that should have opened slammed shut. She stayed at a shelter for 6 weeks, then moved in with a college friend for 3 weeks until the friend's lease situation changed, then back to another shelter. Kaya changed schools twice in 4 months, each time losing friends she had just started to make. Simone sold her engagement ring at a pawn shop on Washington Street. 3 carats. Byron had paid $14,000 for it. She got $800, enough for 2 months of phone bills and a winter coat for Kaya. She skipped lunch every day so her daughter could have 3 meals. One night at the shelter, Kaya looked up from the thin mattress they shared and said, "Mama, are we camping again tonight?" She said it with a smile, like it was an adventure, because at 5 years old she didn't understand what a shelter was. She just knew she was with her mother. And her mother was everything, and everything was going to be okay because Mama said so. Simone held her daughter close and whispered, "Yes, baby. Just a little more camping." And then she cried, silently, into the collar of a donated sweater, so Kaya wouldn't hear. Weeks crawled forward. Simone sat on a park bench one afternoon while Kaya played on the swings. She reached into her bag and pulled out the Harvard degree, unfolded it carefully like opening a letter from someone who had died. She stared at the words, the embossed seal, the signature of the dean, the name Simone Washington printed in elegant script. Her grandmother's voice came to her distant now, faded like a radio station losing signal. Education is the one thing nobody can take from you. But a man had taken her money. A system had taken her housing. A gap on a resume had taken her career. And this piece of paper, this beautiful, expensive, hard-won piece of paper could not buy milk, could not pay rent, could not give Kaya a bed to sleep in. For the first time in her life, Simone doubted her grandmother's words. She folded the degree back into her bag. Slowly, gently, like folding the flag at a funeral. And then she stood up, took Kaya's hand, and walked toward the food stamps office on Tremont Street. Not because she wanted to, not because she had given up, but because she had tried everything else. Every door, every option, every ounce of pride she could spend, and this was the last one left. The food stamps office on Tremont Street smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, 2 of them flickering in a rhythm that felt like a headache waiting to happen. Rows of plastic chairs lined the walls, blue, scuffed, bolted to the floor like the people sitting in them might try to steal comfort itself. A number dispenser sat by the entrance. Red digital display. Currently serving 119. Simone pulled her ticket. 147. She did the math in her head. 3 hours, maybe more. She found 2 empty chairs near the back wall. Sat down, pulled Kaya onto the seat beside her. The little girl looked around the room with wide brown eyes, taking in the gray walls, the water-stained ceiling tiles, the woman at the front desk who hadn't smiled since the Clinton administration. "Mama, is this like the doctor's office sort of baby? We just have to wait our turn." Kaya accepted this the way 5-year-olds accept most things, completely, without follow-up questions. She found a stack of extra forms on the empty chair next to her, flipped one over to the blank side, and pulled a stubby pencil from her coat pocket. She started drawing. A house, a tree, a sun with a face. Simone picked up her own form. Gray paper, small print, lines and boxes, and questions that reduced a human life to check marks and dollar amounts. Name, date of birth, social security number, address. She wrote the shelter's address. The pen felt heavy doing it. Household size, 2. Monthly income, 0. She kept writing. Employment status, unemployed, duration, 4 months, reason for unemployment. She paused, wrote domestic situation, which was the polite way of saying my husband stole everything I had, and the legal system couldn't be bothered to stop him. Then she reached the line that made her stop breathing. Highest level of education completed. Simone stared at the blank space. Her pen hovered. She could feel the weight of that answer pressing against her chest like a hand. She wrote it slowly, each letter deliberate. J.D., Harvard Law School. She looked at those words on that form. A Harvard Law degree on a food stamps application. Two worlds that were never supposed to touch, colliding on a single line of gray government paper. It felt like wearing a wedding dress to a funeral. Like something beautiful in the wrong place at the wrong time. The woman sitting next to her leaned over slightly. Mid-50s, tired eyes, hands that had worked hard for a long time. First time Simone nodded. The woman gave a small knowing exhale. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. Something in between. It gets easier, or maybe you just stop caring. Hard to tell which one happens first. Simone didn't respond. She just stared at her form and wondered which one would happen to her. The hours crawled. 126, 133, 141. Kaya filled both sides of 3 forms with drawings. Butterflies, a cat, something that might have been a dragon or might have been a dog. She hummed while she drew. Soft, tuneless, the only beautiful sound in the entire building. 147, Simone's number, called from a speaker mounted on the wall. A voice flat from repetition. She stood up, smoothed her blazer. The same blazer from her old life, navy blue, slightly worn at the elbows now but still pressed, still presentable. Her nails were clean but bare. Her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had given up on everything she used to care about, everything except looking like someone who hadn't given up. She took Kaya's hand, walked toward the desk in the far corner of the room. The caseworker sitting behind it was a woman named Paulette Hayes, 56 years old, silver hair cut close, round glasses that sat low on her nose. She had the face of someone who had seen 10,000 stories walk through that door and had learned to process them without breaking. 19 years behind this desk. 19 years of numbers and forms and faces that blurred together like rain on a windshield. Paulette took Simone's file without looking up. Opened it, started flipping. Page 1, standard intake, eyes scanning, professional, routine. The way a mechanic looks under a hood. Looking for the problem, not the person. Page 2. Income history, employment records, blank spaces where paychecks used to be. Page 3. Paulette's hand stopped. Not slowly, not gradually. It just stopped. Like someone had pressed pause on a remote control. Her eyes locked onto a line of text halfway down the page. She read it. Then read it again. Then her gaze lifted from the paper and landed on Simone's face. It wasn't pity in her eyes. It wasn't judgment. It wasn't the standard issue sympathy of a government employee processing another case file. It was recognition. Sharp. Personal. Like seeing a ghost you'd been told was dead. "You're Simone Washington." Simone blinked. "Yes." Paulette's voice changed, dropped half an octave, lost its professional distance. The Simone Washington who worked at Whitfield and Associates Family Law. Simone's pulse quickened. She hadn't heard that firm's name spoken aloud in over a year. It belonged to another life, another woman. Yes. How do you know that name? Paulette didn't answer right away. She set the file down on the desk, took off her glasses, pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of her nose, and breathed. A long breath. The kind you take before you say something that's going to change the room. 7 years ago, she said quietly, my daughter Shayla was 24 years old, married to a man who controlled every dollar she earned. He put her name on debts she didn't know about, drained her savings. When she tried to leave, he hired the most expensive lawyer in Suffolk County and filed for full custody of their son. Said she was financially irresponsible, used the debt he created as evidence against her. Paulette's voice cracked on the word evidence. Just barely. Just enough. Shayla had nothing. No money for a lawyer. No family who could afford one. Legal aid had a 6-month waiting list. She was going to lose her son to the man who had stolen her life. Simone sat perfectly still, something stirring in the back of her memory. A face. A file. A late night at the office. 7 years ago. A young attorney at Whitfield and Associates took Shayla's case, Paulette continued. Pro bono. Didn't charge a cent. Worked nights and weekends for 4 months straight. Found every hidden transaction, every forged signature, every lie buried in a spreadsheet. Went into that courtroom and tore his argument apart piece by piece. Paulette looked at Simone with eyes that had gone glassy with tears. My daughter called me that night, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said, "Mama, she saved my life. She didn't even charge us. She just believed me when nobody else did." Paulette paused. Let the silence hold. That attorney was you, Simone Washington. I never met you, but I have said your name in my prayers every single night for 7 years. Simone's breath left her body like it had been knocked loose. The memory flooded back. Shayla, 24, shaking hands, a little boy clinging to her leg in the conference room. A case Simone had taken home with her every night because something about it felt personal even before she understood why. She remembered, and the irony of this moment hit her like a wave she didn't see coming. The woman who had saved Paulette's daughter from financial abuse was now sitting in front of Paulette, applying for food stamps, because the same kind of abuse had found her, the same playbook, the same quiet violence dressed in spreadsheets and legal documents. Simone opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her throat had closed around the weight of it. Paulette reached across the desk and placed her hand on top of Simone's. Warm, steady, the hand of a woman who had learned how to hold people up because she remembered what it felt like to fall. I sat in that chair, Paulette said softly, 22 years ago. Same office, same plastic seat. I had 3 children, no degree, no job, a husband who walked out and left us with nothing but a stack of bills and an eviction notice. She looked around the room, the flickering lights, the scuffed floors, the long line of people waiting for their number to be called. I applied for SNAP, food stamps, then housing assistance through Section 8, then WIC for my youngest, then TANF for temporary cash while I looked for work. It took me 4 years to stabilize, 4 years of forms and waiting rooms and caseworkers who treated me like a number. And the whole time the hardest part wasn't the poverty, it was the shame. The feeling that needing help meant I had failed. She shook her head slowly. People think food stamps mean failure. They don't. They mean you're still fighting. They mean you walked into this office instead of giving up. That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength there is. Simone's eyes burned. She pressed her lips together to keep herself from falling apart in a government building. Paulette continued. When I finally got stable, I applied for a job here, at this desk, because I wanted to be on the other side of it, so that the next woman who sat in that chair wouldn't feel as alone as I did, so that at least one person in this building would look at her and see a human being instead of a case number. Kaya looked up from her drawing. She studied the 2 women with the quiet intensity that only children possess. Then she spoke. "Mama, why is the lady crying? Is she sad too?" Simone wiped her eyes. "She's not sad, baby. She's remembering something important." Paulette smiled through tears. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. I'm remembering." She turned back to Simone, straightened her glasses, pulled the file closer. "You saved my daughter, and I am going to sit here and process this form and make sure you get every single thing you're entitled to. Not because of Shayla, but because that is what this desk is for." Then Paulette looked at the file again. Page 3. The income history, the debt record, the credit report that told the story of a woman systematically dismantled from the inside out. And something else shifted behind her eyes, something sharper than memory. She had seen this pattern before. Your ex-husband, Paulette said carefully. Did he move assets out of joint accounts before the separation? Open credit lines under your name without your knowledge? Simone went still. How did you know that? Because my daughter's ex-husband did the exact same thing. Same method, same sequence. Transfer the assets first, then the credit cards. Then destroy the score so she can't rent an apartment or pass a background check. It's not random, it's a system. Simone stared at Paulette. The words landed like stones dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward through everything she thought she understood about her own situation. She had spent years identifying this pattern in other women's lives. She had built legal arguments around it, written motions dissecting it, stood in courtrooms, and explained it to judges who sometimes listened and sometimes didn't. She knew the playbook by heart. But when it happened to her, she hadn't seen it. Because when you are inside the house, you cannot see the shape of the roof. "This isn't just your story," Paulette said quietly. "This is a pattern. And you know that better than anyone in this room. You've helped women fight this. You've won cases against men who do exactly what was done to you." Simone's hands were shaking. Not from fear, not from cold. From something that felt like the first crack of dawn after months of darkness. A recognition, a shift. The moment when survival stops being enough and something fiercer takes its place. "You know the law," Paulette said. "You've helped women like my Shayla. Now you need to help yourself." Simone looked down at the food stamps form on the desk. Her name on it, her Harvard degree on it, her zero income and her destroyed credit, and her 5-year-old daughter drawing butterflies on the back of government paper. And for the first time in 4 months, she didn't see a dead end. She saw a road, narrow, steep, littered with obstacles that would take everything she had left to climb over. But a road. Paulette put her glasses back on, picked up the file, and did something she hadn't done in years. She went off script. The SNAP application took her 8 minutes. Fast, clean. No wasted motion. She filled in the fields Simone had missed, checked the boxes that would expedite processing, flagged the file for priority review. 19 years behind that desk had taught her exactly which levers to pull and when. But she didn't stop there. She picked up the phone on her desk. Dialed a number from memory, not from a directory. From years of doing this work and knowing which doors actually opened when you knocked. First call, a transitional housing program on Columbia Road. Not a shelter, not a cot in a room with 30 other women. A real unit, small but private, with a lock on the door and an address you could put on a job application. Paulette spoke to someone named Denise. Spoke quickly, efficiently, the way people talk when they've built trust over years of shared purpose. She hung up, looked at Simone. "They have a 2-person unit available starting Monday. It's not luxury, but it's yours. Private room, shared kitchen, 6-month program with case management and job placement support." Simone opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Second call, a legal aid organization that specialized in domestic abuse cases. Paulette asked for intake, gave a brief summary: financial abuse, asset fraud, destroyed credit, Harvard-trained attorney as the victim. She paused, listening, then nodded. Wrote something down on a sticky note. Hung up. "They can see you Thursday at 10. Bring everything you have. Bank statements, credit reports, any documentation of the transfers. They've handled cases like this before." Third call, a child care subsidy program connected to the Boston public school system. Paulette gave Kaya's age, confirmed the housing situation, asked about kindergarten enrollment timelines. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. She hung up and turned to Simone with the sticky note. "Kaya can start at the Henderson School on Warren Street. They have a before and after care program covered by the subsidy. You'll need her immunization records and a proof of address, which you'll have once you're in the housing unit. 45 minutes. That's all it took. 45 minutes and 3 phone calls and 1 woman who decided that her job description was a floor, not a ceiling. Simone sat in the plastic chair holding the 3 sticky notes like they were made of glass. An address, a legal appointment, a school for her daughter. 3 pieces of paper that represented something she hadn't felt in 4 months. A future that existed past tomorrow. "You didn't have to do all this," Simone said, her voice barely holding together. "Your job is just to process the form." Paulette looked at her over the rim of her glasses. Steady, certain. "My job is to process the form, but my purpose is to make sure the form actually changes something. If this story is resonating with you, take a second to subscribe. It helps us keep telling stories that matter. Now let's continue." Simone stood up, Kaya beside her, clutching her drawings in one hand and her mother's fingers in the other. She looked at Paulette. And, for the first time in 4 months, Simone Washington did not feel invisible. She felt seen, not pitied, not rescued. Just seen. By a woman who understood exactly what it meant to sit in that chair because she had sat in it herself. 2 weeks later, Simone unlocked the door to a room on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone on Columbia Road. It was small. 1 double bed pushed against the wall, a folding table with 2 chairs, a mini fridge that hummed louder than it should, a window that looked out onto a parking lot. No art on the walls, no hardwood floors, no harbor light catching the glass in the afternoon. But it had a lock, a real lock, on a real door, with a key that belonged to her. Kaya ran inside the way children run into places they've already decided to love. She climbed onto the bed and bounced once, twice, then lay flat on her back with her arms spread wide, like she was making a snow angel on a mattress. "Mama, this bed is so big." It was a standard double, nothing special. But to a little girl who had slept on shelter cots and borrowed couches and the back seat of a bus for the better part of a year, it was enormous. It was everything. Simone set down the suitcase. The same suitcase. The only suitcase. She stood in the doorway and looked at the room. Not through the eyes of the woman who once lived in Back Bay. Through the eyes of the woman who had slept sitting up at the shelter so Kaya could stretch out on the cot. This room was enough. This room was a beginning. The first time she used her EBT card at the grocery store, her hands trembled. Not from shame, from the precision of it. $234 a month for 2 people. That was the SNAP benefit. It broke down to about $7.80 a day. $3.90 per person. Every meal had to be calculated. Every item. She stood in the checkout line at the Stop and Shop on Melnea Cass. Bread, rice, beans, peanut butter, milk, bananas, chicken thighs on sale, frozen vegetables, oatmeal. She loaded each item onto the belt carefully, watching the total climb on the register screen. The woman behind her in line glanced at the EBT card, then glanced away. Quick, practiced. The kind of look that pretends it never happened. Simone kept her back straight, looked the cashier in the eyes, swiped the card, took her bags. She went home and did something that would have made her Harvard professors either laugh or cry. She opened a spreadsheet on the free computer at the library and built a weekly meal plan. Calorie counts, cost per serving, nutrient distribution. She applied the same analytical framework she'd once used to dissect case law to the problem of feeding her daughter on $3.90 a day. Her education was finally useful again, just not the way anyone had imagined. Thursday came. Simone walked into the legal aid office on Dudley Street, carrying a folder she had organized with the obsessive precision of someone who used to bill $400 an hour for exactly this kind of work. Bank statements, credit reports, property records, a timeline of every transaction Byron had made during their marriage that she could trace. The attorney who met her was named Reginald Foster, 48 years old, 15 years in legal aid. He had the kind of face that had absorbed other people's worst days for so long it had developed a permanent expression of calm readiness. Nothing surprised him. Nothing rattled him. He had seen the system fail people in every way the system could fail, and he kept showing up anyway. He took the folder, opened it, started reading. His eyes moved slowly at first, then faster. He flipped back to cross-reference something, flipped forward again. His eyebrows climbed half an inch, which for a man like Reginald was the equivalent of standing up and shouting. "This isn't just a divorce," he said. "This is fraud, marital asset fraud. And based on what I'm seeing here, it's not even subtle." He did this openly because he assumed you'd never have the resources to fight back. He looked up at Simone. "And we can fight it." Simone didn't just nod. She reached into her bag and pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first, research she had done at the public library. Printed case law, Massachusetts statutes on marital fraud, precedent cases where courts had ordered full asset restoration after discovering undisclosed transfers. She had also found something Reginald hadn't seen yet: 3 real estate transactions Byron had executed during their marriage, properties bought and sold through a trust. Every single one completed without Simone's signature. Under Massachusetts law, that was a violation. Clear, documented, actionable. Reginald stared at the second folder, then at Simone, then back at the folder. In 15 years of legal aid, I have never had a client who could do half the research you're doing. You don't just know the law, you are the law. Simone shook her head. The law didn't protect me, but maybe now I can make it protect someone else. They filed the motion together. Reginald as attorney of record, Simone as the client who happened to know more about marital financial abuse than most practicing lawyers in the state. They requested full asset recovery, credit restoration, compensatory damages, and a formal investigation into Byron's financial conduct across multiple relationships. Byron responded the way men like Byron always respond. He hired a firm with 17 partners and an office that took up an entire floor of a downtown high-rise. He filed for delays, extensions, motions to dismiss. He sent a letter through his attorney, suggesting that Simone was being vindictive and emotionally unstable. Simone read the letter at her folding table. Kaya was asleep in the big bed. The mini fridge hummed. The parking lot outside was dark and quiet. She folded the letter, put it in the folder, and kept working. Her grandmother's voice came to her that night, soft, distant, like someone calling from the other side of a long hallway. Education is the one thing nobody can take from you. And, for the first time, Simone understood what that sentence actually meant. Not that education was a shield that protected you automatically, not that a degree made you immune to harm, but that knowledge was a weapon, a tool, something you had to pick up and swing and fight with when the world tried to break you down. Nobody could take her education. That was true, but she had to choose to use it, actively, fiercely, not as a nameplate on a door, but as a blade in her hand. She was done surviving. She was ready to fight. Kaya started first grade at the Henderson School on a Tuesday in April. She wore a second-hand dress with yellow flowers and the winter boots that were starting to get tight at the toes. Her backpack was borrowed from the housing program's donation closet. It had a faded unicorn patch on the front pocket and a broken zipper on the side. She walked through the front doors holding Simone's hand, and she didn't look back. By the second week, she had a best friend, a girl named Tori, who shared her crackers at snack time and taught Kaya how to do a cartwheel on the playground grass. By the third week, Kaya stopped asking if they were going to move again. She just went to school, came home, did homework at the folding table with a pencil that needed sharpening every other page. She was becoming a child again, not a child surviving, just a child. One afternoon, Kaya's teacher sent home a drawing, family portrait assignment. Every kid in the class made one. Kaya's showed two people standing in front of a small brown building with a yellow door. One tall, one short, both smiling, both holding hands. Mama and Kaya, written in careful, wobbly letters at the bottom. No daddy, no third figure, no empty space where one should be. Just two people, complete. The teacher had written a small note on the back. She asked Kaya about her family during sharing time. Kaya told the class Daddy lives in a different story. The teacher thought Simone should know. Simone read the note, standing in the kitchen. She looked at the drawing, the yellow door, the smiles, the two stick figures holding hands like nothing in the world could pull them apart. She taped it to the mini fridge with a piece of masking tape. Then she walked into the bathroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bathtub, and cried. Not from sadness, not from grief, from the staggering realization that her 5-year-old daughter understood more than she had ever let on. Kaya knew. She knew the story had changed. She knew the old life was gone, and she had decided in her small and extraordinary way to keep living in the new one without looking back. Children are not fragile in the way adults imagine. They are fragile the way seeds are fragile, easily crushed, but desperate to grow. That evening, the apartment smelled like mac and cheese, the boxed kind, 79 cents. Simone had learned to make it exactly the way Kaya liked it. Extra butter, stirred slowly. Served in the one bowl they owned that didn't have a chip. Kaya sat cross-legged on the bed, eating and humming a song she had made up herself. Something about a butterfly that lived in a shoe. The lyrics didn't make sense. The melody didn't follow any rules. It was perfect, Mama Kaya said between bites. When you were at Harvard, did they teach you how to make mac and cheese? Simone laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from a place so deep you forget it exists until it surfaces. No, baby. That's something your Grandma Gwen taught me. And it's worth more than any degree. Kaya nodded seriously, as if this confirmed something she had suspected all along. The lamplight was warm and yellow. The radiator clicked softly. Steam rose from the pot on the stove. And for a few minutes, the world outside that small room didn't exist. No courtrooms, no credit reports, no forms or filings or fights left to fight. Just a mother and a daughter, and a bowl of mac and cheese, and a song about a butterfly that lived in a shoe. Reginald called on a Thursday morning. Simone was walking Kaya to school. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail the way she'd trained herself to do when unknown numbers called, because, for months, unknown numbers only meant debt collectors and legal threats. But she answered. Simone. The court accepted the case. We're on the docket. She stopped walking. Kaya tugged her hand. Mama, we're going to be late. Simone pressed the phone closer to her ear. Say that again. The judge reviewed our motion. Accepted it. We have a hearing date. But that's not all. Reginald paused. The kind of pause a man makes when the next sentence carries weight he wants you to feel. The forensic accountant found something. Byron's first marriage, his ex-wife Colleen, same pattern, identical. He moved assets into a trust, opened credit lines in her name, destroyed her financial independence, then used her ruined credit as leverage in the divorce. She settled for almost nothing because she couldn't afford to fight. Simone's free hand tightened around Kaya's fingers. Her daughter looked up curious but patient. This isn't a one-time thing, Reginald continued. This is a system, a method. He's done this before. And that changes everything. We're not just filing for asset recovery anymore. This is potential fraud. Criminal fraud. The judge saw the pattern and fast-tracked the hearing. Simone stood on the sidewalk outside the Henderson School. Parents streamed past her. Children laughed and ran toward the entrance. The world moved normally around a woman whose entire future had just shifted on its axis. Mama, Kaya said. School. Simone knelt down, kissed her daughter's forehead. Go learn something amazing today. Kaya grinned. I always do. She watched her daughter disappear through the doors. Then she called Reginald back. What do I need to do? Everything you've been doing. Keep researching. Keep building the file. And there's something else. He told her about the nonprofit, a small organization called the Women's Advocacy Legal Network. They worked with domestic abuse survivors, provided legal support, housing, navigation, financial counseling. They had an opening for a part-time staff attorney. The pay was modest. $52,000 a year. A quarter of what she'd once earned. But it came with benefits. Stability. Purpose. And they needed someone who understood financial abuse from the inside. Simone interviewed on a Wednesday. She wore the blazer. The same navy blazer that had been to the food stamps office, to the legal aid clinic, to every appointment and every moment where she needed to look like the woman she was still becoming, worn at the elbows. $12 from a thrift store on Newbury Street, but she pressed it the night before and hung it on the bathroom door like armor. The panel was 3 women, 2 attorneys and the executive director. They asked about her background, her experience, her understanding of the populations they served. She answered everything clearly, precisely the way a Harvard-trained lawyer answers questions. Then they asked the question that mattered. Why should we hire you? Simone looked at the 3 women across the table. She thought about every answer she could give. The degrees, the case experience, the publications, the awards from another lifetime. Instead, she told the truth. Because 6 months ago I sat in a food stamps office with my Harvard degree in my bag and my daughter in my lap. I know what it looks like on both sides of the desk. I've been the lawyer and I've been the client. I've written motions about financial abuse, and I've lived inside it. And that's something you can't teach in any law school." The room went quiet. The executive director wrote something on her notepad. One of the attorneys nodded. They called her that evening. She got the job. $52,000 a year. A fraction of her former salary. But every single dollar was hers, earned by her. Deposited into an account with only her name on it. Controlled by no one. Owed to no one. It was the richest she had ever felt. The courtroom was smaller than Simone expected. No grand chamber. No wooden balconies or vaulted ceilings. Just a square room with fluorescent lights and a judge's bench and 2 tables facing forward like opposing trenches in a war that had been fought mostly in spreadsheets and silence. Simone sat on the left side. Reginald beside her. Their table held 2 folders, a laptop, and a legal pad covered in handwritten notes. Her blazer. The same blazer. $12. Byron sat on the right side. 3 attorneys from one of Boston's largest firms flanked him like bodyguards made of billable hours. His suit cost $3,000. His watch caught the fluorescent light every time he moved his wrist. Gold. Heavy. The kind of accessory designed to remind everyone in the room who had more. Simone looked at that watch. She remembered the first time she saw it. Their anniversary. He'd worn it to dinner and said, "This is what success looks like, baby." She'd smiled then. She didn't smile now. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Reginald presented the evidence methodically. Account transfers made without Simone's knowledge or consent. Credit cards opened in her name without her signature. Stock options sold from a joint brokerage without required spousal authorization. 3 real estate transactions executed through a trust she was never informed of. Then, the second layer. The forensic accountant's findings. Colleen Byron's first wife. Same method, same sequence. Assets transferred, credit destroyed. Financial independence dismantled piece by piece until the woman had nothing left to fight with. Byron's lead attorney argued for context. Framed the transfers as financial management. Called the similarities to the first marriage coincidental. Used words like prudent and strategic and family-oriented. Words that sounded clean in a courtroom but meant something entirely different in the life of a woman sleeping in a shelter. The judge listened, read every document, asked questions that were sharp and specific, the kind of questions that told Simone this judge had seen cases like this before and had no patience for the performance. Then came the moment Simone had waited months for. Not revenge, not vindication, just clarity. She looked across the room at Byron Tate. For the first time since she'd left that apartment in February, she looked directly into his eyes. No fear, no anger, no trembling. Just the steady gaze of a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ground up on food stamps and library computers and a $12 blazer. Byron held her gaze for 2 seconds. Then he looked away. Down at the table, at his hands, at his $3,000 suit that couldn't protect him from the truth anymore. The judge ruled. Byron was ordered to return $215,000 in assets, transferred without legal consent. He was held responsible for eliminating all debt fraudulently placed under Simone's name. Her credit restoration was mandated by court order. And an additional investigation was referred to the district attorney's office for potential criminal fraud charges based on the pattern of behavior across both marriages. Simone sat still. She didn't cry, didn't celebrate, didn't move. She just sat there and let the words settle into her bones like warmth after a long winter. Outside the courthouse, Reginald stopped her on the steps. "You didn't just win your case, Simone. You created precedent. Every woman who comes after you, every wife whose husband runs this exact playbook, they'll have your case to point to. You didn't just fight for yourself. You built a road for someone else." Simone looked out at the street. Boston traffic. Sunlight on brick. Ordinary life moving past a courthouse where something extraordinary had just happened. Her grandmother's voice came one last time. Quiet, close. Like a hand on her shoulder from somewhere she couldn't see. "Education is the one thing nobody can take from you." Simone smiled. And for the first time, she didn't just believe it, she understood it. Education alone hadn't saved her. Education hadn't stopped Byron. Education hadn't paid rent or bought groceries or kept Kaya warm at night. But education plus a woman behind a desk who cared, plus a legal aid attorney who showed up, plus a housing program that opened a door, plus the courage to sit in a plastic chair and fill out a form when every part of her screamed that she was better than this. That combination, that system, that web of human beings choosing to help each other, that was what nobody could take. 6 months after the court ruling, Simone and Kaya moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a brick building in Dorchester. It wasn't luxury. Laminate floors that squeaked when you walked too fast. White kitchen cabinets with handles that wobbled if you pulled too hard. Curtains from Target. A couch from a second-hand store that smelled faintly of fabric softener and someone else's history. But it had 2 bedrooms. A door with a deadbolt. A mailbox downstairs with the name Washington written on a small white card in Simone's handwriting. A lease with one name on it, hers. Kaya carried a single box into the apartment. She walked through every room like an explorer mapping new territory. Touched the walls, opened the closet, turned the faucet on and off 3 times. Then she pulled the family portrait drawing from her backpack, the one from school Mama and Kaya, 2 stick figures holding hands in front of a brown house with a yellow door, and pressed it against the refrigerator. Simone found a piece of tape. "This is our forever house, right, Mama?" Simone knelt down beside her daughter, smoothed the drawing flat against the cold white surface. "This is our start, baby." At the Women's Advocacy Legal Network, Simone's first case arrived on a Monday. A woman named Chenille, 28 years old, 2 kids. A husband who controlled every bank account, every credit card, every dollar that entered or left the household. Chenille didn't know she had legal rights to marital assets. Didn't know financial abuse was a recognized form of domestic violence. Didn't know she could fight. She sat across from Simone in a small office with second-hand furniture and fluorescent lights that hummed like the ones at the food stamps office. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes were low. She looked like a woman who had been told so many times that she was nothing that she had started to believe it. Simone sat down across from her, not behind the desk, beside it, at the same level, eye to eye. "I was you," Simone said quietly. "6 months ago I was sitting exactly where you're sitting. I didn't know how I was going to feed my daughter. I didn't know if anyone would help, and someone did. Now I'm here for you." Chenille looked up, and for the first time in that conversation, her eyes held something other than resignation. On a Thursday afternoon, Simone walked back into the food stamps office on Tremont Street. Same fluorescent lights, same scuffed plastic chairs, same number dispenser by the door. But this time, she wasn't carrying a form. She was carrying 2 cups of coffee and a bag of pastries from the bakery on Washington Street. Paulette looked up from her desk, saw Simone standing there, and smiled the way people smile when something broken has been mended. They sat at the same desk where Simone had handed over her file, the same desk where Paulette's hands had stopped on page 3. But everything was different now. The coffee was warm, the pastries were fresh, and the 2 women talked not as caseworker and client, but as friends, as equals. As 2 people who had survived the same kind of storm from different directions and found each other in the wreckage. "I didn't save you," Paulette said, tearing off a piece of croissant. "I just opened a door. You walked through it yourself." Simone shook her head. "You did more than open a door. You saw me. In a room full of numbers, you saw a person." Paulette was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There's someone I want you to meet." The following Saturday, Simone sat at a table in a coffee shop in Roxbury. Across from her was a woman she hadn't seen in 7 years. Shayla, Paulette's daughter, 31 now, healthy, strong, working as a dental hygienist. Her son, the little boy, who had clung to her leg in Simone's conference room all those years ago, was 11 now and playing basketball in a youth league. Paulette sat between them. 3 women. 3 different chapters of the same story, bound together by a thread that had been woven across 7 years of separation and silence. Shayla reached across the table and took Simone's hand. "You saved my life," she said. "And my mama saved yours." And now you're saving someone else's. Simone looked at Paulette. Paulette looked at Shayla. Shayla looked at Simone. The circle was complete. Simone Washington walked into a food stamps office on a cold afternoon with a Harvard degree folded inside her bag and a 5-year-old daughter holding her hand. She thought she had lost everything: her career, her home, her savings, her credit, her dignity, her faith in the words her grandmother had pressed into her bones since childhood. But she was wrong. She hadn't lost her education. She had simply forgotten that knowledge is not a shield you wear. It's a tool you pick up, a weapon you choose to swing. It protects nothing on its own. It only works when you decide to use it. She hadn't lost her dignity. She had only forgotten that asking for help is not the same as admitting defeat. That sitting in a plastic chair and filling out a form for grocery assistance is not the end of a story. It's the bravest chapter in one. She hadn't lost herself. She had only needed someone to look at her file, look past the numbers and the debt and the zeros in every column, and say 2 words that changed everything: I see you. She didn't need a billionaire. She didn't need a miracle. She didn't need luck. She needed a system that worked, a woman who cared, a lawyer who showed up, and the courage to walk through a door she never imagined she'd have to open. The caseworker looked at her file and froze, not because the file was unusual, but because it was too familiar, because poverty doesn't care about your GPA, because a Harvard degree can't stop a man from stealing your future in spreadsheets and silence, and because sometimes the person who changes your life is not a stranger with unlimited wealth. It's a woman behind a government desk who remembers exactly what it felt like to sit on the other side of it. Simone Washington didn't just apply for food stamps that day. She applied for a second chance. And the caseworker who froze didn't just process a form. She reconnected a thread that had been woven between them for 7 years, waiting for the right moment to pull tight. This story is fictional, but the experiences it portrays are not. Financial abuse occurs in nearly 99% of domestic violence cases, according to the National Network to End Domestic Violence. It is the quiet kind, the invisible kind, the kind that leaves no bruises, makes no sound, and traps its victims in a prison made of debt and destroyed credit and financial dependency. And it happens to women with degrees and women without them, women with careers and women who never had the chance to build one. Millions of Americans with college degrees rely on SNAP benefits every single year. Poverty is not a character flaw. It is a circumstance. And circumstances can be changed, but only when systems work and people choose to care. I wrote this story because I believe we need to stop assuming that education makes you immune to hardship. A degree does not protect you from an abusive partner. A resume does not feed your child when every door slams shut. What protects people is other people. Caseworkers like Paulette who see a human being instead of a case number. Lawyers like Reginald who fight without a big paycheck because the fight matters more than the fee. And strangers who choose compassion over judgment when they see someone swiping an EBT card at the grocery store. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence or financial abuse, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available at 1-800-799-7233. You can also visit your local legal aid society for free legal support, and SNAP benefits can be applied for through your state's Department of Transitional Assistance. Help exists, but sometimes it takes one person on the other side of a desk to remind you it's there. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. See you on the next one.